An amazing story, and the composer said to tell you that there is absolutely no artistic license in this libretto. All the things you're going to see and hear actually happened. This iconic 20th century Welsh poet had a crazy, crazy life. And we're so privileged and so happy to be able to present this work to you with these incredible singers. They've worked incredibly hard this week, and I think it's going to be a revelation in so many ways. Last Days of Dylan and Caitlin.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you staying for the open forum Q&A, it will be happening in the tent to your right, under the tent to your right for about 30 minutes.
The libretto was written first. It took me a long time to find the librettist I wanted. I finally found him in Wales, and he'd written a number of plays about Dylan Thomas. I sent him a recording of my music and told him what I had in mind, gave him an outline of the opera. And he agreed to do it, and we did it by email between Wales and Wyndham in 6 months. And then I started writing the music in 2007. I took 2 years off, 2009 and 10, and I had help getting back to it, and finished it in 2013.
The opera seems to imply that he didn't actually die from alcohol poisoning, but more from bronchial pneumonia and diabetes.
Yes, that's correct. And it wasn't until the past 10 years that biographers were able to get the records from St. Vincent's Hospital and do a lot of sleuth work and realize that, in fact, it was a combination of bronchial pneumonia, the injections that Felsenstein was giving him without blood tests. He was a Dr. Feelgood. This was 1953. Thomas suffered from emphysema, and the pollution levels in New York City in October of 1953 were at the highest level ever. So you have all of these things combined, but Felsenstein is the one that gave him the injection that put him into the coma.
I do, on a personal note, Mr. Manno, you sort of like the father watching the child spread its wings. You've been at this for many years. I kidded you about it.
Yes, you have.
How did it feel to see it performed, and is it up to snuff?
Definitely up to snuff. Definitely up to snuff for a workshop performance. I couldn't be happier. And what's it feel like? You know, you have a child, you raise a child, and then it leaves, and it's no longer yours. It belongs to the performers.
Any other questions?
By choosing to focus on the last year, I knew that was an exciting time. He was famous Dylan in America, you know. But by focusing on just that, we're kind of, it's all, there's no arc, it's all down and out. You know? So I wondered why. And what's really interesting is this is a guy who used to write fantastic poetry and was moving, and now this is his ruin of a man, and that's kind of where the juice is that differentiation. So if you gave us flashbacks or something about the younger Dylan, also much more poetry, his actual poetry, sung, woo, complicated, that seemed to me both of those would have helped this.
Yeah, I understand. Well, Catlin gives you a prologue,
yes,
and then we go back to the life in the boathouse when he's in his writing hut writing the poem.
You're not going to Jack.
Well, actually, he wrote that much earlier, but the poem that I have him writing in the opera is the poem that forms Dylan's aria, "In My Craft or Sullen Art," which is his artistic credo. So there is that poem, and then there are references to others of his poems. But I wanted to concentrate on the man and the story, this tragic story. It's full of comedy too, you know. It's a tragic comedy, but it's told initially through Catlin's prologue, and then she sums it up in the epilogue, remembering their life together, remembering the good life together.
Well, what's the tragedy, though? Is it the beauty of his poetry balanced against his ridiculous drunken death, or what's the tragedy?
The tragedy is all of it. It's all of it, really.
Because the poetry was supposedly...
Because he died at age 39, and he had so much more poetry in him.
He touched so many
And
people.
you know, his work is really not that large. His poems are not. There aren't that many.
One of the most poignant lines for me is, I mean, I'm in a drunken haze on the ship, but I say, you know, they made him perform like a dancing bear, and all he wanted was to be a poet. And I think that, for me, is the tragedy of Dylan Thomas, is that he loved being, you know, he loved being the performer, but he really did have the soul of a poet. And
a poet is then what? Somebody who reaches into a place and finds the words to explain the mystery, or what's the poet?
That sounds good to me.
That's really.
Yeah, actually, many of the words that Emily was singing were Catlin Thomas's actual words from her 3 autobiographies.
He just didn't have money to do what he had to do. He couldn't seem to take care of himself.
Right.
And I was just wondering what you think. Could he have done what he did without the alcohol?
Yes.
You think he could have been a great poet consistently?
Yes. Because all the people in Lauren, I actually met people who knew him when my wife and I went to Lauren. We spent a couple weeks in 2 different years in Lauren, in the village. We walked where he walked, and we actually met older men and women who knew him. And many of the people there said he really wasn't an alcoholic. They said he only drank beer in Lauren. But it seems that when he came to this country, everybody grabbed a hold of him. He went to cocktail parties, he started drinking whiskey, and they just, they made him into a dancing bear. I have a question for Maestro. What was this experience like for you?
Be gentle.
Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This experience for me was extraordinary. Extraordinarily pleasurable, I might add. But the whole thing made me very nervous because, as someone referenced earlier, I was given someone's baby. And my goodness, I did not want to drop it on its head. But I felt a great responsibility to care for it, to nurture it, and to present it as close to the ideal that Robert had as he imagined it in his head. And it's funny, Robert and I were talking on the road, reflecting what we were going to do today. And it's also been very pleasurable because I felt that Robert and I and Sam, the three, have created a wonderful combined and close trio to, on the one hand, take dots and lines on a page, the essence of the creation of the composer, and then as recreators, to make that happen. Who's more important, who's less important? Well, dots and lines on a page and words on a page are nothing if they're not taken by someone else and made something of them. However, Sam and I can do nothing without those words, dots and pages. So it's this perfect equilibrium that we've found, and I felt very close to both Sam and Robert in being a partner to make this happen. We couldn't have done it without each other. And that is an enormously pleasurable experience, to be sailing in flight, if you like, or sailing or being in flight like an aeroplane, holding hands with others and making it happen. That is a beautiful experience, and there are numerous other pleasurable elements of working with the soloists and trying to analyze the music and just jiving with the technical challenges of it. That's fun in itself. But the most pleasurable thing is taking care of this baby and finding a beautiful partnership between my co-creators and recreators. And that includes the cast, by the way.
Bob and I worked on this piece originally, and so it's nice to see it come to fruition and see the prologue and the epilogue, I think, stand on their own, you know. But it's so nice to have them in their place and to see just the chaos that comes in between it, and then have these moments of stillness. So that was really nice. From my point of view, to have these very, very lyrical moments, and then just all of the craziness that filled in the gaps. And Sam was such a brave man to try to. It was like a Cecil B. DeMille production with all the characters, and so finding a place for all of us that we would be featured when we needed to be featured, and get out of the way when we got out of the way. But that is, I don't know if everyone appreciates what a challenging idea that is for a director who's used to being able to do it without the music and have us move throughout space. So anyway, bravo to Sam.
Bravo, yeah. I just wanted to add that when I started writing this opera, I wrote it with Emily in mind for the role of Catelyn, so I think that's important to know.
Where did you get the kids?
Hey kids!
Well, Maria invited me to do this role, so I accepted, of course, and as far as I know, she was the one in charge of casting? Yeah, she was pretty much in charge of casting, as well as Louis, and so she chose me and my friend Layla to be part of the kids.
How old are you guys?
Oh, I'm 13.
This is Tona Miller, who portrayed Marilyn Monroe. I gave her all this stratospheric writing. I just was curious.
And then when it sounded so easy, he goes, "Wow, I should have written that even higher."
It's true, I did say that. I let her go loose. So Tona, what was it like?
It was hard. It was difficult to learn, but once I had it down, it was a blast. It was a really fun part. Packed a lot into a couple of pages, and I really loved it. And then he said, "Can you say peeing longer?" And I did, and then he said, "Can you make it a higher note?" And I said, "Okay," and I did, and you know, that's why I make the big bucks.
Rhythm that I had written, I said, "Hey, leave it. I like that better. I'm going to change it." So that happens in the process.
Were you changing things in the tent?
In the tent, no, I was the sound cue guy.
Just
I was
listening.
giving sound cues.
Now, what's the next step?
The next step is we're going to shop it around.
The video a little bit, short.
Yeah, there's thanks to Rich Pedrick here, we'll have a video of the proceedings, and so we'll see. And we have a star tenor here who fell in love with the piece and wants to take it to Wales, to the Welsh National Opera, to see if he can interest them in it.
So, because we just heard the piano, do you have an arrangement for all the other instruments?
Yes, it's orchestrated.
Oh, it's going to be, we didn't hear any of that.
Not today.
Workshop.
It takes a lot of money.
Yeah, orchestras are
I'll just say, you know, to your point, something I wanted to comment on from earlier is that we do have this notion that these stories should have a dramatic arc, and it's an interesting point that because it's so condensed in time, seems like it's a downward spiral, but I would probably talk about it differently and say that it falls. I think it's a unique genre, this opera. Actually, I can't really square it into a category, but I would call it more of a portrait opera. And what I think we are meant to walk away with is a sense of the person, not a particular story about a moment in his life. And I do feel like we do get the opportunity to see him in a whole bunch of different situations, and to feel joy and pain and tragedy and also lust. And
Not only Dylan, but also Kathleen. It's really two portraits.
Yeah. It's a portrait of two people, and in a sense, a relationship, I think. So that's an interesting thing to take on, you know, to try to create a living, breathing portrait on the stage of someone who people have ideas about from history and whatnot. So.
And also to try to correct some misconceptions.
When you're coming up with an opera, a new opera, to what extent are you concerned with telling the story versus making it, you know, commercial aspects, making it commercially viable for it to be performed many times, or are those really just one and the same?
Well, no, they're not. I mean, really, to think commercially is a, well, I don't think commercially. That's part of my problem. I think in terms of, so that I did try to put as much humor in it as there was in the story and to highlight that. So in that sense, it's commercial in the sense that there's a lot of humor and there's a lot of these where it'll veer from absolute tragedy to all of a sudden Kathleen will say a line and it's ridiculous and people laugh. You know, it's like, I think of it as a tragic comedy, this opera. Because there is a lot of comedy in it. But, the arc is true, it's down at the end. But I think of it more like this, because in the middle, it's, you have these fun scenes, and then it's that kind of an arc. So I think it is an arc.
Do you think that he listened to his own advice and did not go into the good?
No, he didn't listen to his own advice. Yeah, that poem, by the way, was written about his father's death. Do not go gentle. The aria, Dylan's aria.
There aren't a lot of arias.
No. No.
Could you make a comment on why you chose to do that?
Because I wanted to write a drama. I didn't want to write set pieces. Kathleen in the prologue and Kathleen in the epilogue has these ariosos. They're not true arias with it start and end, bing, boom, like Dylan's aria does. But there are plenty, and Liz, the character Liz Reitel, has her arioso and other bits like that. But when I write, it's more through composed. So it's not, I don't think commercially, although there are some commercial aspects to it. I try to think more artistically than commercially. Some of the recitatives will start with singing and end with speaking. So I try to make it as natural as possible. I try to write naturally for the human voice, even though it's very difficult. Right, Emily?
Yes. Well, we're very grateful. It's a huge jump to be able to do this for an audience, and it was such a receptive audience. Oh, here's our Dylan. He's not dead. It's a miracle.
There's a lot of things I could say about this, incredible project, but I'm going to pay the composer a very high compliment, and it's also a big confession for me. So I may never do this piece again, but I have to say that this festival was really good about sending me study materials, audio on Dylan, photographs, which I looked at one step up from Kurt Sorley. I did look at the material, but I looked at the material that was the most essential for me, which was the score. You might not know that from my performance, but I did look at it before today. But anyway, the score was my source, for better or worse. And I didn't know until I got up here, what the rest of the piece entailed, what it offered, what it conveyed and communicated to me, because I certainly didn't look at anybody else's part. I barely looked at mine. No, I looked at it a lot. And I literally built my role from the foundation of the Dylan that this man conceived of. It's not the real Dylan, but art never is real, is it? It's artificial. But we portrayed something, and I took my definition of Dylan from what Bob started and planted the seed of in my mind. And then whatever I gave to you was the filter of me nurturing that seed and giving it to you. So that was how I created my Dylan, but he really created it. And I'm so gratified to see so many people here too. It's wonderful. So Philip Cutlip is Dylan Thomas.
We thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.